And so God says to Abraham, I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. That's a good offer, fundamentally. I mean, it means, what does it mean to be made a great nation of? Well, perhaps it has something to do directly with your descendants, but I don't think it's just that, is if you're a force for good in the world, then that radiates out from you. And if you're good enough, it's difficult to say how much of an impact on things you could have. Dostoevsky, who was a very crazy person, partly because of his epilepsy, he said, a man is not only responsible for everything he does, but for everything that everyone else does. And you think, well, no. No. And yes, sometimes no. Sometimes that's what you think if you're cataclysmically depressed, right? Is that your sins are so egregious that they're unforgivable, and that in some manner you're at fault for everything that's terrible with the world. But there's actually truth in that, and there's actually redemptive truth in that, is that things wouldn't be so bad if you weren't so far from what you could be. And that's terribly pessimistic because it's all on you, man. But it's terribly optimistic because, God, there's a lot of things that you could do. And if you're crying out for something to do, then that's the best news you could possibly have. It's like, things aren't so good, but neither are you. So if you stop doing the things that you knew to be destructive, which is the right place to start, if you're going to clean up your room, what do you do first? Well, you just get rid of the mess. And what, no one has to come in and tell you, hopefully, what's the worst mess. It's just, it announces itself to you. And you can certainly know yourself, and this is a very easy meditative exercise, to sit down and think, okay, I'm doing one thing really stupidly that I should stop doing. It's like, how long is it going to take you to figure out what that is? It's about 2 seconds, right? You've known it forever. And you could even make it less demanding. You could say, there are some stupid things that I'm doing that I know are stupid and wrong, that I could stop doing, that I would stop doing. And then you can just start with that. And you can just do that. And maybe it's just a little thing, although it's not, because it's a step forward on the proper voyage. It's not a small thing. And you think, well, what would happen? You could say, let's do this for a year or even a month. Just try not to do things you know to be stupid and wrong for a month. And that means not to say things you know to be stupid and wrong as well. Maybe that's the most important thing. Just do it as an experiment. See what happens. And it's so fun because I have people writing to me from all over the world who are saying they're doing that. They're saying, well, I cleaned up my room and then I stopped saying stupid things, and my God, it's like things are way better. It's like, who would have guessed it? And so it's low-hanging fruit, man. Because that's the other thing. If there's a lot of things wrong with you, then it's really easy to start fixing it, You got there's so much territory that you can inhabit. I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee. That's good. I mean, the whole nation thing, that's positive. But to have God on your side, that's, you might want that. When things get rough, that would be good. And make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Wonderful. That's a good deal. And I will bless them that bless thee. That's good too. And curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. That's something. That's something. Wouldn't it be something if you could wake up and your day was composed in part of people thanking you for all the good things you've done in the world? Wouldn't that be good? It's not impossible for that to happen. So Abram departed. Yes, as the Lord had spoken unto him. And Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years when he departed out of Haran. That's old. Now Abraham lives a long time, but this is also part of the story. So he has a wife who can't have children. He has nothing. Obviously, he's been hanging around Dad's shack for a little too long, given that he's 75, right? It's time to get a fire lit underneath him a bit. And so he's not got much going for him, but he still decides to move forward. And I've seen this too, like if you don't have your destiny in hand by your time you're 30, it's rough. You start hurting. And if you don't have your destiny in hand by the time you're 40, then you really start hurting. And 40 is a real fork in the road. The fork in the road, that's always where you meet the devil, by the way. And that's because every time you have to make a decision, the possibility of evil beckons. That's why that is. I had a friend, I've told you a little about him, and he killed himself just after 40. He had had a book published with a very small press. He was quite a good writer, but he could not get himself together, and it hit him too hard at 40. And I'm not saying that it's hopeless at 40. I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying that partly because of these verses, but also partly because of what I've seen in my clinical practice. I've had people come to me who have had very chaotic and ill-spent lives, let's say, who were in that neighborhood of age, and it's true for people who are older as well, who then decided to make a real effort and to try to make where they were better, instead of being bitter about where they weren't, because that's the bitterness that really does you in. It's really not good. It's the opposite of gratitude. It's the manifestation of resentment. It makes you malevolent. It's very, very bad to be bitter. It's hell to be bitter. And if you're 40 and you're not successful, then you have to accept your lot, and you have to start to improve what's right in front of you. And if you do that, it doesn't take very long. It's quite interesting to watch people. Things can be a lot better in 6 months, and they can be way better in 2 years. Like, it's a struggle, uphill struggle, but it's by no means impossible. And I don't know, again, what the limit of that is. I suppose it depends to some degree on the degree of your commitment. But anyway, so it's another indication of the real validity of this story. God isn't setting this up to be easy, right? Abraham's old, and his wife is old too, and more than that, she's barren. How is he going to be the father of nations? How is he going to be successful? Well, the initial departure point is insufficient, radically insufficient. And that's very inspiring, because it means that you can start from where you are. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered. And he has a relationship with Lot, right? And he doesn't have his own son, but his brother died, and so he takes his nephew as his son. That's grateful. He could be very angry and have nothing to do with him because he didn't get his own son, but that isn't what happens. He's offered a substitute, let's say, and he accepts it. And so good for him, and that's also something that I've seen that characterizes people who can make the best of a bad lot, is they don't get exactly what they want, but something comes along that offers possibilities that are sufficient, perhaps, if exploited properly. And they open their heart and welcome them in instead of rejecting them in bitterness. And so that's a good thing, and that's part of Abraham's character. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and all the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, into exile, let's say, and into the land of Canaan they came. And that's another repetition of the transformation story, right? You have to go to a land where you're not welcome. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed I will give you this land. And there he builded an altar to the Lord who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he built an altar unto the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. Now, we don't understand these rituals precisely. I don't know if the people who did this engaged in a meditative ritual. Was that the idea, that you take something of value, you do this, you undertake this dramatic transformation, a life and death transformation? And is that an aid to meditation? And what do? Do you sit down and think? Do you pray? Pray being to ask, to what do I do next? How do I orient myself in the world? It's a useful exercise to do that. I think it's something that people could do every morning. I think it's useful to sit down and think, okay, what's the most important thing I should do today? I have an array of things that call to me to be done, some of which I will do with joy, and some of which I will bear as responsibilities. But they array themselves in front of me. And what should I attend to first? Well, do you ask or do you decide? And it seems to me, when I do it, because I do it all the time, I do it every morning, I try to sit down and think, okay, I've got things that I would like to do and things that call to me out of necessity. What do I do first? And it's not so much a decision as it is a question. And I don't know what I'm calling on. I'm calling on my capacity to think, I suppose, but that's not my capacity exactly. I can commune with whatever provides answers, and I can think that that's me thinking, and it isn't that I believe that I can't think. I do believe that I can consciously think, but that's not the same as calling for inspiration. It's not the same process. Just like a dream is not conscious thinking, it's something that happens to you. And that kind of inspiration is also something that happens to you. Because I ask myself, well, what's the most important thing I could do next? And then I have an answer to that. But it isn't because I decided exactly. I've decided that I'll do it, whatever it is, and that I want to know what it is. Those are the decisions. But there's an involuntary aspect to the sorting that occurs. And that's the psychological equivalent, I suppose, to this. And I guess the sacrifice is when I feel that I will do whatever it is that calls to be done, then I don't do the other things that I might want to do. And that's a sacrifice. To me, it's the proper sacrifice, because my sense is that things don't go properly unless you do what's most important. And if I want things to go properly, and I do, because I've had my taste of things not going properly, I want things to go properly. And so then, it's not so difficult to do what's necessary to do what makes things go properly under those circumstances. And it's partly... See, this is partly why the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is embedded in the Abrahamic stories, I think, because that's an apocalyptic story, right? If things go badly enough, the whole city is destroyed. And the reason it goes badly is because the people in the city do not behave properly. And the people in the city might be you. And so if you're not behaving properly, then you go and so does the city. And maybe you do want that. But maybe you don't want that. And if you don't want that, then maybe, and you know that if you don't do things properly, then it's you and the city. If you actually know that, then maybe that terrifies you badly enough so that you're willing to make the sacrifice to do the right things instead of the impulsive things that you might otherwise want to do. You know, I learned from Viktor Frankl and from Carl Jung and from Alexander Solzhenitsyn and from many of the people whose works on the Holocaust that I read, and on the catastrophes in the Soviet Union. And the people who'd studied it most deeply always came to the same conclusion. The state became corrupted because each individual allowed themselves to be corrupted, or perhaps participated joyfully in the process of being corrupted. And the consequence of that was the end of the world. And so what that means is that if you don't behave properly, then you bring about the end of the world. And maybe you think, well, that's only the end of your world. Fair enough. Or maybe it's only the end of your family's world, which I suppose might give you some pause. But there's more to it than that, because you're connected to everyone else. And what you do that isn't good distributes itself, and all the things you don't do that could be good take away from the whole. And so if you know that, and I do think you know that if you take it seriously, because if you look at the historical events, the cataclysmic events of the 20th century seriously, I do not think that you can fail to come to that conclusion.